Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Alexandra School to discuss pension reform and the NIS. My name is Rawdon Adams. I'm the Deputy Chair, and tonight I'm joined by the Chairman of the NIS, Mr. Leslie Haynes, on my left, by the CEO of the NIS, Ms. Kim Tudor, and by the Independent Actuary, Derek Osborne, who in a few moments will be presenting to you. Before we kick off, I just want to say we've got 2 hours here tonight. We want to get through as many questions and ideas and solutions as possible, so we will try to be succinct, and we'll ask you also to be succinct. And with that, I think I'll hand over to my chairman for a few remarks before we actually get into the meat of the presentation by Derek. Chair?
Thanks, Rawdon. Good evening, all. I'm glad to be at Alexandra's. As Deputy said, we are here this afternoon. We have 2 hours. We are trying to be succinct, and we are looking forward, and we will be listening eagerly to the solutions put forward by you all to assist us with, at the end of the day, coming up or finding determining a policy to go forward with the National Insurance Scheme. Thank you very much. I'll now hand over to Derek or Kim. Derek? Hand over to our actuary, who will present the present, as he sees it, in a nutshell, the present problem or issue that we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, everyone. It's good to be with you again. And as the Chairman alluded to, the topic at hand tonight is the National Insurance Fund. And every 3 years, the National Insurance Act requires that an actuary be engaged to look at the fund, assess the fund's state and ability to deliver on its promises. If you think about a 25-year-old who goes to work for the first time, the NIS says for the next 42 years, we're going to cover you for sickness, maternity, employment injury, and invalidity benefits. And then when you're about to retire, we then pay you a pension for life called old age pension. It's a really long-term promise, and it's important that we look to the future and try to forecast the ability of the NIS to deliver on that promise, for, in this case, 42 years as a worker and another 20 plus years as a pensioner. So every 3 years we do the review, make the projections, and we want to start tonight by talking about why NIS exists in the first place. If you think about the NIS, it's actually 55 years old, celebrated 2 months ago. The ILO came to the Caribbean back in the day, Jamaica, Guyana, Barbados, implemented these European-designed social security systems that they had in Europe. And they put them in place in the Caribbean, and they've worked mostly well for, in this case, in Barbados, 55 years. And so just to make sure we understand why NIS was put in place and what we're trying to achieve and avoid today as a major entity in Barbados, this single sentence on the left pretty much summarizes what we believe NIS is supposed to do in Barbados and the main purpose of the NIS in Barbados. And that is a comprehensive system of social protection, and it's going to provide income replacement benefits that reflects, most importantly, Barbados' value system, not Trinidad or Jamaica or Guyana, or not Germany or Canada, but it has to reflect Barbados' value system, what you really believe Barbados wants to deliver for its people. It should respond on an ongoing basis to changing economic conditions, whether they be social, demographic, I mentioned economic, and because it's a service institution, it delivers pensions every month to 45,000 plus pensioners. It pays short-term benefits every single day. It should satisfy customers' needs, and that's responsive to their questions, payments on time, and so forth. And that's a lot said in one sentence. But at the end of the day, we have to ensure that the benefits that we pay are adequate, that they meet the needs of those people who need them, when they need them. But on the other hand, they also have to be affordable. If you think about people and benefits, most times people want the biggest benefit possible, but each comes with a price. And so we have to find a balance between adequacy and affordability. And if we think long-term, as I mentioned with the long-term promise that's been made for our children and grandchildren, it's important that we think about sustainability, the ability to maintain enough money to meet the promise when it's their turn or your turn to get. So these three things sometimes go contrary to each other, but we have to find a way to delicately balance adequacy of benefits, affordability and sustainability. We also try to avoid certain things, and most importantly, primarily, is the fund being depleted. And I'm sure you all have heard by now that the projections are that the fund could be depleted if nothing is done. We definitely want to avoid that. The last thing we want is, pension day comes and NIS is late. There's no money to pay everybody. Okay, that's the last thing we want in Barbados. And so we have to find a way to move that curve further to the right. We also want to avoid generations to come paying much higher contribution rates than we are paying now. They were started off at around 8% back in 1960s. Now it's 18%. Right? If we don't do things early enough, it could be 25, 30% contribution rates for children and grandchildren. Not going to happen, right? All right, I hear you. So we have to avoid that. The last thing we want to avoid that's really, really important, and it's not necessarily financial for the fund, but it's financial for a lot of people who today are self-employed or informal. The coconut vendor on the highway, the carpenter, the plumber, the ZR driver, some doctors, some lawyers, Only 1 in 8 of these people pay contributions today, which means that 7 of 8 of those people are going to be pensionless, without pension from NIS, in the future. And if you're 80 years old or 70 years old and you can't be a plumber anymore, you can't be a bus driver anymore, you either have to depend on your children, if you have children, your neighbors, the breadfruit tree, or the state. Right? We don't want to have people depending on the state or the breadfruit tree. Right? So the idea is for them to get pensions, and it's very important that we find a way to get them in. And we'll discuss more of that later on. Now, you will recall that pension reform was done back in 2004, and that pension reform included several changes, including increasing the contribution rate from about 14.25% to 18.25%, so 4% increase. The pension age was increased from 65 to 67, with provisions for early pension from age 60. And the other change was that the pension formula was changed slightly to make it a little less generous. Still pretty good pension formula, little less generous. And the hope was that we wouldn't be back here again this soon. However, the economy and the population hasn't really cooperated well with us, and so we're back here. The population has begun to decline just because we have more deaths now than there are births. That started in 2017. There are fewer children being born than people dying. With outward migration, that means further population decreases, as we still believe there's outward migration. Employment levels have come down as the economy growth has been rather small. This graph here shows the economic growth for the last 14 years or 16 years. Most of the years have been down. So of the last 13 years, 9 have been down. COVID was an extreme year, we know. But even before that, there were mostly down years than up years. So the economy has not been growing much. If we transfer to looking at the number of people who actually work and who actually contribute to the NIS, we see that those numbers are also declining. The orange on the top is employment that we get from the Barbados Statistical Service, And the yellow is NIS data with number of contributors each year. So we see that from 134,000, say, in 2007 and 2011, we're now down to, even pre-COVID, we're down to under 120,000. After COVID, about 150, 114, 115 last year. So it's a decline. Similarly for NIS, an even steeper decline in number of contributors. This means that the fund is now receiving contributions from fewer contributors for every one pensioner taken out. If you think about a family with 6 children, it's not difficult to take care of your parents if they have no incomes. Each child do a little bit and mom and daddy are okay. If you only have 2 children or 1 child, it becomes more pressure on that particular child or 2 children to make mommy and daddy satisfied that they have food, they have electricity, they have water, they have cable, telephone, and so on. And so it's the same for the government and same for NIS. Both depend on current income, in the government's case from taxes, NIS case from contributions, to help pay benefits and sustain the fund. But as we see, it's declining. To go back to this curve, this chart, we then have debt restructuring. So in 2018, the government took a decision to write off some of the debt that is owed to different bondholders. And yes, NIS was affected, just lost just over $1.1 billion. But in the grand scheme of things, and I'll show you later with the curve, it really only changed the outlook by 3 years. So it's a large sum of money, but when we look at the extent to which that would have helped save the fund in the future, it's only 3 additional years of life the fund would have had with that, without debt restructuring. And debt restructuring had also purposes, right? There was an effort by the government to reduce interest costs, to have more of the money go towards the infrastructure and doing things to put the economy back on good footing. And for NIS, the thinking is that a stronger economy is important for a strong NIS. It's impossible to have an NIS that's based on contributions from workers and investment income from the government and other securities within Barbados in a weak Barbados. Right? So having a strong Barbados and a Barbados economy is critical to NIS survival. None of us could control COVID-19. Across the world was faced with COVID-19 starting in March 2020. For the National Insurance Fund, the emphasis there was on contribution income. Benefits didn't really change, admin costs didn't change, investment income slightly affected, but not much. But the main effect was on contributions, as we had fewer people working, especially in 2020 and gradually coming back in 21 and 22. I mentioned a while ago self-employed persons, only 1 in 8 now contributes. That's a challenge we have to deal with. And these last 2 points about administrative challenges and reporting on the fund's performance have also been challenges for the fund. It's been 10 years that there have been no statements, financial statements audited on the National Insurance Fund, on the Employment Fund and Severance Fund. And that's not healthy for transparency and sharing with the public, how the funds have been managed. And also from a service standpoint, some of the service levels that you get in terms of how long it takes to process claims, answering the phone and so on, not the best, that needs to be improved upon. So there's work to do, but a lot of the challenges come from the economic performance over the last 16 to 18 years. Right? And that's one of the reasons why the year we project the economy, the fund to be depleted, has been brought forward by a few years. So we look at the outlook of the fund, but first, the population. This graph shows that we expect both a decline and an aging of the population. So I mentioned earlier, for the last 5 years, we've had more deaths, we've had births. We believe that migration outward still continues, so more going out than coming in. And so we expect the population to decline, and we see the blue at the bottom is children, the yellow in the middle, the working age population, and the green on top, which is the most important for NIS, because of all NIS expenditure, 73% of benefits goes towards old age pension. So if you think about, it's already the highest cost benefit, and the size of the population will more than double over the next 50 years, that's a big challenge for the fund. If we show the picture of the projections for NIS reserves, which are now just about $4 billion, we project depletion, and we only have one line, but we did 3 scenarios, or more scenarios. The expectation is that between 2034 and 2041, if nothing is done, same contribution rate, same benefit formula, then the fund will be depleted. Now, it's important to note that if the fund is depleted, it doesn't mean there's no more NIS. What it means is that NIS then has to collect all of its money, more money to pay benefits. There's no more savings in your account, right, to call upon. What this chart shows is that already today, we are collecting less than is being spent. So the green line shows what's the cost of benefits and admin costs, about 24%, whereas the contribution rate on average, that's collected is only 18%. So already there's a 6% gap of wages between contribution income and in total expenditure. And that gap is now been filled by investment income and a little bit of assets that have to be sold to help meet benefits. So what we see on this chart is the blue is contribution income. The top line is total expenditure. In between that is what we call the gap that needs to be filled, which contributions alone doesn't do. And so because over the last 55 years, funds have built up, because in the early years, contributions were way more than benefits, and that money was invested, it earned a good rate of return, and now they're almost $4 billion of assets. Investment income on those assets also allow the fund to pay benefits, but as you see, a little bit of green has been used in the last 2 years, and if we keep going forward without increasing the blue or reducing the expenditure and the gap widens, you see that there'll be more and more green being used up every year, which is your savings. And if you think about your own family, if you have money in the bank and hard times hit, and you're forced to dip into your savings every month, and you keep doing that, then eventually there'll be none left. And for NIS, if there's none left in the late 2030s, what we see here is that the orange section is what we call the gap that needs to be filled. And the question is, where will that gap be filled? And I think that's what we have to talk about for the next hour and a half that we're here, into what are the solutions that we can either increase the blue, which is contribution income, or we could reduce the black line on top and make the gap smaller, right? But there are very few options that we have on the table. And so, having said all of that, the fund is not sustainable. I'm sure you'll agree with me, it's not sustainable at the current contribution rate and benefit formulas. So the question is, how could $4 billion be exhausted so quickly? I mean, that's a lot of money, right? $4 billion. Sorry. And the three main reasons we see are one, which we have zero control over, and that's demographics. So 18 years ago in pension reform, the number of people paying in as contributors for everyone taken out as a pensioner was 3.6. Now it's 2.4 or 2.3 today if you think about that was 2 years ago. That's going to fall further, we believe, to 1.8 and keep falling as time goes on. So my example earlier about parents with 6 children versus the neighbor parents with 2 children, life is different for the parents with the children who have 6 or 5 siblings versus the ones with only 2. The second thing is there are no guidelines. So the actuary has come in every 3 years, and this is up to date. Every 3 years and made recommendations, but there's no requirement for the board or the government to act. There's no trigger that says if so-and-so is the case, then something has to happen. Either rate goes up, benefits go down, something changes. The third thing is kicking the can down the road. If governments decide to just get the report, see the results, put it on the shelf and leave it alone, then we'll end up, sooner rather than later with depletion. And if you think about 12 years ago, 12 years ago was 2010. I'm sure many of you remember something significant from 2000 around that time, 9, 10, 11. That's not too far away. So 12 years from now is not too far away. So the question is, can we save the fund? Is it possible to make the fund sustainable once again? And the answer is certainly yes, and I'm glad to see people who are nodding. And we have to find a solution, right? We have to find a solution. The number one is the economy. I go back again to a strong NIS is not possible in a weak Barbados or weak economy. We have to find a way to create more jobs, create higher paying jobs, whether it means more people coming into Barbados, Barbadians coming back home, and creating opportunities. So the goal is to have a healthy, growing, sustainable economy. The second one is a good design of the system. I mentioned earlier that NIS is 55 years old. It looks very much like it did 55 years ago. Just a few things were added, some numbers, some rates have changed, but it's pretty much the same benefits, the same structure, and so on. And if you think about 55 years ago, those of you who are 55 years or older, there were very few self-employed people back then. for the most part, people were employed. The system was designed for employed people. The employer has filled out the form every month, and they paid in the contributions, and everything was good. But now with self-employed people who are on their own, and they're working pretty much 8 to 4, they don't want to see any forms. They can't afford to come to the office between 8 and 4 to pay their contributions. And also, most of them don't have level income every week or every month. So some of them may have a lot of money in the tourist season, but things are dry in this, in the non-tourist season. And so good design means finding a system, finding ways for NIS to reach the self-employed people where they are, to identify people who are dead, to cut them off right away more quickly, to pay more efficiently, and provide more information on past contributions to contributors. This also has to deal with other government programs on welfare that provide income support to people, right? Any government program needs to be well designed and well synced so that there are no overlaps and there are no gaps, so people don't fall between the cracks. The third ingredient, we believe, is what we call admin systems. The last 2 years in COVID, we've seen so much move, such a huge move to doing things electronically, right? And we need to find a way to have systems that are effective and efficient, right? Which means low cost, but really powerful at delivering on good service, timely, and allowing people, again, who are self-employed, to be able to pay their contributions in the rum shop or in the grocery store, Lyman Digicel have found a way to sell minutes in the rum shop or to sell minutes on the corner of the road, right? NIS could find a way possibly to collect contributions in the rum shop or in the supermarket. You're smiling, but I think it's possible, right? Systems allow us to do so many things these days that we didn't think of 5, 10 years ago. And the final ingredient is honest and responsible government. Some people say good governance, but what I'm talking about here is not necessarily government as in the government we call the government of Barbados, the Prime Minister and the Cabinet and so on. This is all levels of government, and NIS included, the board, the chairman, the deputy chairman, the CEO and her executive team, everybody doing things in the best long-term interest of Barbados, right? And here, so when you have challenges, we know that they're short-term challenges. People are catching hell, some people right now. We're talking about 15 years from now, and people are hurting now. You have to find a way to balance the current challenges with those yet to come. And I think, so leaders who are honest and responsible and think about not only, those who are in front of them, but also those to come, are what we call honest and responsible. And I think what we have, going on now in Barbados for the last 2 weeks, and this dialogue is testimony to a government that has been honest and responsible with this particular report. The report came in, it was kind of shock and awe, and right away, discussion began to try and save the NIS. It's a very important institution. We must try and find a way to save it. So the question is, what can we do? What can we do to make sure that we have a sustainable fund? And if you think about your own family circumstance, if you're having financial challenges and you want to make it better, only 2 things you could do. Just 2 things. You either find a way to get more money in or find a way to get less money going out. Okay, so it's only 2 big picture things. More money coming in, less money going out. On the more money coming inside for the NIS, of course, we talk about more contributors, higher contribution rate, investment earnings, higher, if possible, and or government having to help fill that gap that we saw earlier. I think we have to remember that any money coming from government is really coming from you as taxpayers, because government collects money from taxpayers every day, and they fix a road, they build a school, they pay healthcare, they do these things every day, but that money essentially comes from taxpayers. On the benefit side, we can look at a smaller average new pension that starts later. So if you think about pensions, if you want to reduce costs going forward, you have a fixed number of people who are coming through turning 67 every day. The only meaningful way we can either reduce the cost in long term is to have people start a little later, so their pension years are a little fewer, and or whenever they start their pension, that first amount is a little smaller than it would have been without the change. Those are really only, well, the 2 or 3 ways that we can reduce pension costs down the road. The third way is the one at the bottom, which is a smaller cost of living adjustment. Some of you may not know, but every January, the NIS increases pensions and payment by average inflation over the last 3 years. It didn't happen in 21 and 22, COVID years. But it should start happening again unless we change the parameters. But every year, it's small, maybe 1.5%, 2%, depending on what inflation was. But it hopefully allows the pensioners to buy the same basket of goods, bread, sardines, corned beef, flour, sugar. What they buy, so what they could buy 5 years ago, they could still buy today and hopefully buy 5 years from now. On the smaller average new pension, we have quite a few options that we can look at to changing. I mentioned a while ago, NIS has looked the same as it does 55 years ago. We could find a new structure. Other countries have made reforms. They've been placed in the challenges that Barbados now is in, and they've found innovative ways to do things consistent with their economy, with the population, with society. And so in Barbados, we could look at a new system as opposed to just tweaking what we have. Additional pillar, for example, we could look at across-the-board pension for every old person in Barbados. So just because you're old, whatever the age is, 70, 69, 68, whatever we decide on, there could be a flat pillar for everybody, and then a smaller NIS on top of that. That's another option, right? So you take care of the poor with the people who are low income, and then on top of NIS, and then some of you have pension plans, and some of you have your own personal savings. I know you have all those things in place. I can see it on your face, right? Or as well as we can look at having benefits that are more targeted, right? Or more progressive, or more equitable, right? So we can try to achieve specific things. Progressive here means we have a higher replacement rate for lower income people and a smaller replacement rate, relatively speaking, for higher income people. Because we probably believe that higher income people have their own additional savings or pension plan that they can call on when they retire. Okay? So as a country, we have a Barbados problem, and I think the solution has to be a Barbados solution. One that works for Barbados, and one that's created by you, and it may not be the final solution. Life evolves. Life evolves. Fertility may go up. It may even go down further. We are living longer, and so it may just mean that you put in place, as I mentioned earlier, some triggers, some benchmarks. So as time goes on, you keep assessing where we are and make any changes going forward. Okay, this is just a summary of some of those options I mentioned. So there are 2 pension ages essentially right now. The first age that you can qualify is 60, and that's a reduced benefit. The age for a full pension is 67, right? So we could make the 60, 62, 63, 64, 65. We could make the 67, 68. I won't keep counting, 68 and 69, right? Or we could change the formula. As I mentioned a while ago, we could change the formula, make it slightly lower for different people. Right now, the maximum 60% is earned after only 36 years. Even though, if you think of a 20-year-old, going to 67, that's 47 years. The maximum is now reached after 36 years, right? So there's a lot of years left when there's no more accrual. So that could either be longer to get to 60%, or even possibly reduce 60% to 55 or 54, 53? No? So these are all options, and nothing is on the table. I'm being a little, humorous tonight. I guess, I'm not sure what I drank earlier, but it's only water. But, so pensions based on career earnings is another possibility in industrialized countries, US, Canada, more in the UK, it's based on career earnings. So essentially, we look at your whole earnings. If you've had a short career, you may get less. Long career, you may get more. And it's based on wages. I mentioned before progressive pensions. And I also mentioned a flat rate benefit with a smaller NIS. So as you see here, there are options. Most importantly, there is nothing that has been decided. All of these are for discussion. We're talking. We aren't yet done talking yet. And again, hopefully we can come up with a solution that everybody won't be happy with the solution, because any option we look at, it means something smaller in terms of benefits or possibly more in contributions. There is some pain involved, but we hope that to lessen the pain so that our children and grandchildren don't have to pay those high contribution rates. So I'm going to stop here and just remind you that as the discussions are ongoing, and I think the deadline might be end of next week for feedback. So there's an email address on the screen that we encourage you to put your thoughts together, jump on your computer, jump on your iPad or your phone, and send your comments. We are working on a survey, and the survey will be designed to identify your priorities, what's important to you. How strongly do you feel about NIS being fair to generations to come? How strongly do you feel about the benefits being either progressive, deliberately progressive? How strongly do you feel about the coconut vendor who duck and dodge for 40 years, getting a pension when he gets older, or not getting a non-con pension when he gets older? Right? Do you believe as a country that we should, even though they ducked and dodged for 40 years, should still get a benefit from the state? Right? And those are going to come in the survey, and we're going to encourage you to look out for that survey, hopefully by tomorrow or Friday, and answer the questions. We want to hear from you. If we get 5,000 responses, great. We get a good feel for what Barbadians think about their NIS and how we can save your NIS. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'll hand over to our Deputy Chair, Rawdon Adams.
Thank you, Derek. Before we actually get into solutions, ideas, Q&A, there are a couple of things in this report I want to highlight and draw out from. And I'm doing this because it's really important that we correctly diagnose how we got here and understand the problem. Because if we don't do that, we're not going to come up with the right solutions going forward. So above all, when you read this report carefully, you'll see that we've got a profound demographic problem. And it's tied to a poor economy, a poorly performing economy in the last 10, 12, even 14 years. What this means is that the NIS house that we're living in, which was designed in 1967, is no longer fit for purpose in 2022. It's simply obsolete. It's not even broken, it's just obsolete. We had a chance in 2004 when reform was started to try and future-proof what was done then. But some of these demographic changes are so profound and deep. They could not have been anticipated. They were unanticipated at that time. Really, the first time we had a chance to fix this, I mean, we're coming now and we still have time, but it would have been far better if we'd come the first year that benefit expenditure exceeded contribution income. All right, that was in 2013. If we had taken action then, it would have been easier. It would still have been painful. But from 2013, 2014, that gap started to grow, and we started to have to dip into the savings, the National Insurance Fund that Derek described. That fund is still strong, almost $4 billion. At current rates, that's 5 years' worth of reserves. But things are not going to stay the same. They're going to change. What we have here is a structural problem. At the first town hall, I described this as a child outgrowing a pair of shoes. Every school year, you want to make sure your kids look good. They've grown. Our benefits have outgrown our capacity to pay for them. This is the root cause that we're facing at the moment. And I want to put, so I know, because everyone here will have seen the reaction in social media and commentary and so on. So I want to put some numbers on that so it's even clearer. So that when we come to talk about things, I'm sure will be raised here tonight, debt restructure, the investment parameters, and if they're being followed and so on, that we have these numbers in our head. So in this report, I think it's page 25, the future projections are laid out. And there's a column there for deficit. Deficit meaning the degree to which our benefit expenditures are exceeding our income. And in 2040, that number is 908 million. That's a big number. In 2050, it's 1.6 billion. These are numbers that sometimes are hard to conceive, but hold them in your mind as we go through the evening. And in 2060, it's 2.6 billion. How can those numbers be growing like that? So I said that the NIS house we've got today is obsolete. And I'm going to do what I did in the first town hall and just ask you 3 questions to try and illustrate this. So the first question is this. Do you know what the life expectancy for a Barbadian child born today is? You have to say that again a bit louder. 80. Yeah, that's about right. It's a little more for women, a little less for men. In 1967, you know what that number was? If you were at the town hall the other night, you're cheating, you know, because you know the answers, right? But in 1967, do you know what the same life expectancy figure was for a child born in 1967? Anyone? It is not 69, but it's not far. It's 67, 67 and a half. I can't quite hear you, but if it's 69 to... Yeah. Oh, well, you're even better informed than I am, because I'm looking at the averages here. So let's take that one to start with. Today we have people living to 80 compared to 67 in 1967. When this scheme was designed in 1967, it was not envisaged that people would live that long. And now we have an increasing retiree population drawing these benefits for a lot longer than was anticipated when this scheme was first designed. This is one of the reasons it's obsolete. It does not fit the times we're in at the moment. So the second question is this. How many children, on average, does a woman today have? I heard a 1.5. It's a little bit more. There's a lot of mathematics in there, you know. It's 1.7. So it's below 2. So why is that important? It's below 2. It means the population is shrinking. Okay, that's today. In 1967, you know what that number was? It was a little under 4. Population was expanding. Again, this is why the system we're using is obsolete. It was designed at a time when the population was growing, and with it, the working population. Now, as Derek has set out and is laid out in the report, our working population is shrinking. And it's the working population who pay the benefits of those who are retired. So we got people living longer and a retiree population that's increasing, and we got a working population that's decreasing. So our benefits are outgrowing our capacity to actually pay for these. Now the third point is probably the most critical one, because population alone is not the answer. Economy, you saw Derek's chart, the top tier on that slide had economy as the thing we have to concentrate on. Today, our economy in the last 14 years has averaged less than 1% growth, about 0.7% growth. Could you put up that chart, please, Derek? Everybody will have lived this. You can remember what it was like. You can remember the headlines and all the reasons behind it. Those don't really matter. It is what it is. But in 1967, the 60s were a decade where on average every year the economy expanded by nearly 7%, 6.8%. So this is the third factor, meaning we're using a system that is not broken, it's just obsolete. An economy that's growing at nearly 7% is creating a lot of jobs. They're being filled by an expanding population, and they're serving a retiree population that we didn't expect to live much past 67, 68 at the time. So now when we go to what's going on today, and we see the commentary about debt restructure and so on, the debt restructure number, I'll say this just so you have it in your minds for when the questions come, $1.3 billion. It's a one-time event. It's a huge number, but it's part of our investment portfolio. 75% of our expenditure comes from contributors. It comes from the working population. It doesn't come from the investment portfolio. And remember those deficit numbers that are being projected, up to $2.6 billion in 2060. And here we're looking at the number, it's $1.3 billion. Now that's why in the report, it says that the impact, if that hadn't happened, it was worth 3 years. We would still be here if the restructuring hadn't happened. It would just be 3 years from now. We'd still have this same problem. People have talked also about the performance of the portfolio, and there have been a lot of implications that it hasn't performed well. But I don't know if we have that chart to hand in the other slides. We actually have a portfolio, that fund, that's recorded over 10 years, average growth of 5.8% every year. So when people are worried about how's the money being invested, 5.8% every year for 10 years, and it's slightly higher for 20 years, tells you that the professionals, because there's a professional unit at the NIS, have been doing this, and they've been doing it well. We also talk about compliance. I want to bear in mind 1.6 billion, 2.6 billion, these deficits. We know that if we formalize the entire informal economy, we know what that's worth because of the Inter-American Development Bank has done studies on it. And we know from NIS data what that's worth in terms of contributions. That's probably worth about $220 million a year. All right, that doesn't make much of a dent in 1.6 billion. So whether it's restructuring, management of the portfolio, or the formalization of the economy, these are things that are important. We have to do them, but they're like houses on the beach as a demographic tidal wave rolls towards us. We have to move to higher ground, and this is why Derek spoke a little bit about structure. Just fixing those things is not enough. Now, that may sound all very depressing, but many countries have faced this, and they've fixed it, and they've found ways to do it. And we have examples we can draw on, and it can be done, and we have the time to do it. So I say all that just to set the stage. We can go to questions now, and whoever wants to go first, please come to the mic, just say who you are. And we want to hear about your solutions, your ideas, and we make notes, we take this seriously, and we feed it into our analysis. So over to you.
Alex Eiffel. This might not be an idea as such, but what I was going to ask is, there has been a trend, you see it on social media, and also the companies like Sagicor and so forth are pushing pension funds, private pension funds. And they're giving you 5.4, 3.8. I think I saw one saying almost 6%. What is stopping the NIS from using those same type of investments? I know you have foreign exchange, things might be a bit difficult to add with foreign exchange, but what is stopping the NIS from using the same systems or structures that those private pension funds are using? Before you answer that, my other point is, right, now, you know, they had this, you got a 12.5% compliance along in the informal sector, but I talked to some youngish people that should be paying money in the NIS fund for me, to pay me. And when I talk to them, they don't seem to see why they should be paying NIS. Has there been any program you've been doing to educate that sector, the public, to actually make them see the benefit of the community benefit of an NIS fund? Because many people don't understand the community benefit of an NIS fund.
Not hearing anything.
Good evening. Thank you very much for that question. I'll deal with the first question, where you asked how come the NIS is not using the same kind of investment instruments. And I would say that we are using the same kinds of investment instruments. As Derek would have said, and is on the chart right there, we have been averaging about 6% per annum, which is very good in this environment. Obviously, in 2019, after the debt restructuring, it went down. So it went down to about 4, and is right now at 4.7. So we are using that. We try very hard. We have an investment policy We try to ensure that there's some diversity. I know persons talk about how much we have invested in government paper, and we are working towards bringing that down. Certainly, the debt restructuring brought that down, but I would like to say that we have about 13% of our portfolio in international equities, which are US, UK, and so forth, 13%. We have another 9% in equities across the region. We have another 9% domestically, so we do invest domestically as well, and we have less than 1% in regional government bonds. So we do work very hard for a diversified portfolio, and the average over the last 20 years has been 6%, which is the same amount that you have said that Sagicor and these others are providing. Are saying, so, but this is actual in this case. With regard to the next question about what are we doing about retirement education and helping the younger persons to understand the benefit of a solidarity fund like the NIS, I think that these public discussions and so forth have thrown up the need for us to step up our efforts with regard to ensuring that we educate the population, especially the young persons. As you know, at 25, your first job, you are very excited. The last thing you want to hear about pension. But we do have to speak to our young people about investing and saving and so forth, and certainly to see the NIS as a part of their savings portfolio as they go forward. It's not going to be the only thing, it's going to be a part of it.
Okay, anybody else? Please, sir, come forward.
Mark Skeet. I would say that in the same way that persons are made aware by way of statements or the income tax payments, there should be the same process for national insurance. That would eliminate the uncertainty of whether or not the funds are paid in.
Mr. Skeet, I didn't quite hear your question, but I think that you were saying the same way that the
income tax. Income tax.
Just lower your mouth to answer to pose the question.
Income tax payments should the same as statements are given to the employer or the employee, right? But for the income tax payments, there should be the same process for national insurance. The employer should be informed as whether they were paid in. This would eliminate the uncertainty of whether the funds were actually paid in by the employee or the person that paid the funds to the national insurance.
Sure, Mr. Skeet, I understand what you're saying. You were saying pretty much that the same way you get a TD5 slip with your income tax, you should get an NIS slip too. And you do. That slip is on the portal. So you can go in right now, Mr. Skeet, sign up for the portal, and you will be given the amount of income NIS that was paid in for you. And you can come to us and we can print that out for you, but you can certainly go online and access that at your convenience.
But there seems to be some uncertainty of some persons that are saying that their funds they don't have they're not certain of whether or not their funds will be paid in. So,
the portal does show you. I know that several persons have come to us at the time when they're claiming a benefit and discovered that nothing has been paid in for them or less was paid in than they anticipated. And certainly, as I said, every NIS holder is eligible to go on the portal and see what has been paid in, not only currently, but for all the years back.
I'm not still clear of what you're saying. Anyway, what is the age period, where the age period begins whereby persons are expected to receive the pensions at age 67? In other words, the qualification period, like from what period, like it starts from like say 60 or whatever.
Yes, Yes, the earliest age is 60, and then you get your full pension at 67. On that same portal to which I was referring, you can actually, before you is 60, you can actually go in and say, if I were to retire at 61, what would my pension be? And it would calculate it for you. There's an estimator of your pension, because you remember that, that there is an amount deducted if you take it before age 67 on a sliding scale.
Well, in other words, right? Where does it begin? You know, like.
It begins at 60, Mr. Ski.
It begins at 60.
Yes.
As long as you reach the age of 60 or 60, that new period, which is 67, right? You know, like what qualifies? Say like before it was 65.
Once you have 500 contributions, which is approximately 10 years of work, you will qualify for the minimum. So as long as you've worked for about 10 years and you've consistently paid it in for your contributions for about 10 years, you should have the 500, which would then make you eligible for your full pension.
It's still not clear. Huh? What I'm asking, right, is, you know, like you change the age from 65 to 67, right? So what I'm asking is, what is the qualification age from? Where you start from? Like, say, you're saying 60, right? But so you know it's 67 now, right? But what you want me clear on is where it starts. You know, some people they were paid at 65, right? On the past system, right? So you said it begins from 60 now. As long as you're.
And that was in place from maybe about 2006, 2007. It went to 67.
Still not. Anyway, thanks.
Okay. Next question. Or I should say, next question or idea or solution, you know, because we're trying to.
Good night.
Thinking about that beach and getting to the highland, you know.
Good night, Stephen Strickland. Now, this evening, we're looking at how we got there and also what are the suggestions. In 2004, when we had pension reform, the reason for pension reform at that time was a falling birth rate and the aging population. So the actual report is consistent from 2004. Yes, the figures have changed, but if they were moving from 2004, then it means that with proper governance, we would have known where we were heading. The National Insurance Department, the fund is managed by a board. And I would like to believe that it's managed by the board, which, according to ILO standards, is tripartite, meaning that both trade unions sit on the board responsible for all employees in Barbados, including myself. The Barbados Employers Confederation, the Hotel Association, sits on the board also, responsible for all the contributions, as it were, submitted by the employer. Because it's a social security scheme, the chief labor officer sits on the board, and because it's a finance institution, the director of finance sits on the board. So the board, based on my knowledge, is comprised of 9 individuals, 2 elected by the government of the day, which means that there are 6 who take responsibility for the governance of the fund to ensure that the fund is properly managed and that it is not exploited in any way. And that would mean then that the actual report in 2004, which would have projected whatever, we would have seen in Barbados also a move towards self-employment. Because I clearly remember when, at the time when we had the 8% pay cut, there was mass restructuring and downsizing, a merging in Barbados where a number of individuals became self-employed. That was the first move. And therefore, well, prior to that, it was moving, but obviously with COVID, it has moved even further in that direction. We are looking at 1 in 8. And therefore, whether the department or the board has responsibility for governance, both in policy and otherwise. So I'm saying that because of the aging population and the falling birth rate, it meant that in 2018, when the suggestion, I would like to believe the suggestion or the instruction to change the rate of pensions, because I'm hearing a lot about the economic situation, but I clearly remember in 2018, there was a situation where the non-contributory pensioners were moved from $155 and they presently stand at $230. Because there was a move at that time to move the non-contributory pensioners to $230, the contributory pensions at that time was $190, which means that we were moving the non-contributors past the contributors. So in order to bring balance, because there was a difference of $35 between the non-contributors and the contributors prior to 2018, it meant then that in 2022, and you're better at knowing the figures that would have impacted on the fund, that the fact that the contributory pensions have moved now at the minimum from 190 to 243 per week, and then there is an increase right up the scale. The question, and I believe that was forced because of what was given to the non-contributory pensioners. So I'm saying here that the fund which is managed by the board, and there are those entities on the board who have vested interest to ensure, because there was the chief labor officer also sits on the board and the director of finance. So because those 6 sit on the board along with the ones that are elected by the government of the day, I as an individual have to ask myself, how much confidence do I have in the board, and that's not the present board, but the National Insurance Board in the past, present, and going forward, that they are willing to stand up to any individuals, whether it's the Prime Minister or any other person who makes a decision whereby the fund to which I have contributed for over 40 years. I spent 35 of my years of life at National Insurance Office. I'm back now working contract, so I am very familiar with what is happening. And right now in Barbados, as I speak, there's tremendous depression in Barbados because there were those that were looking forward to 65, and I do lectures, and I would say to people, it would never move to 67, move past 67. Today I stand here recognizing that it's moving past 67. In 2004, I think I was told that if nothing is done in 2004, in 2020 or 2022, it will almost be depleted. I'm in 2022, and I'm being told that 13 years down the road. And in 13 years down the road, the question is, the board and those that make decisions, what will happen? I'm not going to go near even the 1 billion that was, because that's a different matter altogether, but sufficient that the decision in respect of the increase in pensions, there was a statutory increase, as was stated just now, since 2006. Every year they went up. So there was no need, in my opinion, to give the pensioners an increase in that increase either in 2018, because they were getting a statutory increase when other persons in Barbados were not getting an increase in salary. And therefore, I think that something has to be done with the governance of the National Insurance funds in respect of the board. In respect of self-employed persons, each lecture that I do, I deliberately encourage persons present to encourage family members to either pay contributions or get them registered and collect the money from them and bring it in. There are many self-employed people in Barbados who want to pay contributions, but in the professions that they have, we have like an insurance company. There are insurance agents that go and beg people to buy a policy. I'm saying persons have confidence in the National Insurance Fund. They have confidence in getting the pension at whatever age. I have to say we at National Insurance, because whether I'm working there or not, I will all be a National Insurance person. We must get out there where the people are at. Online and so forth is not going to do it. They're not going to do it. We are in the digital age. I'm a farmer also. And when I'm on the Spring Hall land lease working, the workers on the fellows on the Spring Hall land lease once in the computer. And therefore we have got to get to where they are, especially to help them to understand that a contributory pension is no longer an automatic right. So a non-contributory pension is not an automatic right. And therefore, if they are made to understand that if they do not pay contributions because then they'll be string buried here, it will mean that they're not going to get a pension in Barbados. And there are the many unpleasant surprises when individuals reach pensionable age to realize that they were self-employed because they were earning $21 per week or more. And therefore, the public relations program must meet the people from where they're at. I have a suggestion: we can get all people in Barbados to pay self-employed contributions. It's very, very easy, but we'll discuss that at another time in another place. I will discuss it at another time in a different place. But I'm saying to us that if we're going to be consulting, we must consult with people who understand. And the people who understand are the ones sometimes who are on the ground, rather than persons who sit in the office behind a computer and read figures and whatever else. It don't work. And therefore, I am saying this afternoon that the confidence in the board must be restored. That the board is responsible for my money and your money. And therefore, when individuals seek to put their hand, as the people says, in there, tell them, no, this is our money. This is not the government's money. The government money is managed by Parliament and the Consolidated Fund. That's who you manage that. But the board manages the one that I put there. And I'm passionate about this because every day and night I interface with individuals who are asking questions and they need honest answers. So I pray this evening that what I would have said, my wife will warn me when I go to behave myself. But I told her I'm a Strickland and I'm a Christian, so I don't misbehave myself. But I'm saying to us that we must not just take notes and whatever else and put them in file 45. And then 12 years down the road, we are filling another file with a lot of information that does not relate to Barbados. Mr. Osborne, as you said, it must relate to Barbados. And when he says Barbados, I mean the fella down here and the fella up there. And not only for those up there or only for those down here, it must relate to every Barbadian. Because my great aunt is 107, and I want to make sure that she is well looked after. Thank you very much.
Mr. Strickland, you can't go yet. The idea you had for self-employed.
I said that idea we will discuss at another time.
No. We want to hear ideas.
You are having.
We want to hear ideas.
You are having written submissions, right?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
We're talking now so we could all talk about it.
It is, no, excuse me, no. Mr. Arbor, you took me upon it, and I'll answer. I've always been that person. Now, many years ago, Earl Barr decided to eliminate the hawker's license because he said that it was more expensive to collect it than it was to whatever else. Many years ago, the National Insurance Department had to run out behind ZRs, minibus, and whoever else to pay contributions. The Honorable Owen Arthur wrote into legislation or policy whereby in order for them to renew their permit, they had to get a clearance certificate. How much does it cost? Nothing. It costs nothing. The piece of paper costs nothing. But in order to get it, you must be compliant. And therefore, from that day on, they rushing there every quarter, every month, in order that when they apply for that clearance certificate, they are compliant. Not only National Insurance benefit, but Inland Revenue BRA benefit also. And for me, it's a simple situation. Now, we have 12 months in the year. We just have divided the 12 months in different categories. The same way I pay my renew my driver's license in February because I'm a February born. It would mean that we can have carpenters and whoever else in January. Another category in February, right down the road. Simple. In order for you to function as self-employed in Barbados, regardless of the kind of employment that you conduct, because we have 1 in 7. Remember, we have 1 in 7. Okay? It would mean that all of those persons would have to be registered. Registration online is easy. Therefore, they will be forced to pay contributions to engage in the self-employed area that they are engaged in. And therefore, national won't have to run behind nobody. And when they reach pensionable age, they won't have to come and tell us that they were not self-employed, because that's what they end up doing. So therefore, it is not as difficult as we may think that it is. It is just a matter of scheduling the different categories of self-employment in the different bumps, so that the number of staff that may need to be employed will be easily paid by the contributions that are collected. And therefore, it will move from 1 in 7 to maybe 8 in 8. And therefore, if a carpenter comes at me and says, I'm a carpenter, I want to know that you're registered for national insurance and whatever, so that if I go sue you, I know your registration and whatever else. You don't have to register with corporate affairs, but I'm saying to you, it is not as difficult as we may think that it is. And therefore, I will send my consultancy bill. No, I'm a Barbadian. So I'm
Children and grandchildren are going to thank you.
Right? It is not as difficult.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stricker. Thanks for the idea. And essentially, that's what it takes. People migrate to the US and the UK, right? And when they go up there, they know how to follow the law and pay taxes, right? We have to find a way in Barbados to do the same. If you don't pay your taxes, you don't pay contributions, you can't drive ZR, you can't drive minibus, you can't be a lawyer who practices in the courts and so on. You need to find a way to tie up the system. The first point about the pension increase. So there's a role for government, and there's a role for the board. And I think we all have to remember that, and I'll put it in a highway situation, there's a lane, each arm of government has a lane, right? The minister, on behalf of government, has a lane, and the board has a lane. If the government sets policy, as of X date, the non-con is 190 or what, I think 235 or 230, and the minimum is 243, that is what the board has to follow. Right? So policy like that comes from the government through the minister, and in that case, the board follows through and carries out the wishes of the government in that case. The board is responsible for making sure that, the administration runs smoothly, and in this case, the fund is managed well. Two different things. Each has a lane.
Hi, good night, everyone. Good evening. My name is Rohan Beckles. So I'm just here as someone who works and I contribute towards the NIS. And first thing I want to say is that I heard Derek mention before I got here that there's a survey coming. That was actually going to be my first suggestion. So I'm very, there's a survey coming. And that was actually going to be one of my very first suggestions. So I'm very glad to hear that. I also heard Derek mention the fact, I might not get the wording correct, but he said that one of the issues was there is a process of if A happens, then B happens. I don't know if this fell under governance or something to that effect. And this kind of ties in with what everyone was saying in terms of accountability and everything. Now I know that as a board, the board is concerned with the viability of the fund. That is what you guys are interested in. But if you are putting a governance system in place, if you're going to be monitoring the experience and saying if A happens, then B happens, you also have to be thinking, in my mind, I don't see how it's not possible, and asking yourself, is this sustainable? How long is this sustainable? And the reason why I'm asking that specifically is, as a contributor, I'm finding it really hard to wrap my head around the idea that I could now only be collecting a pension at 70 or 72. Right? So, I mean, I pay contributions for a number of years. You're telling me that I'm only going to be able to collect my pension at 70 or 72, but at the same time, you told me that life expectancy is 80 years right now. So that's, on average, about 8 years. So And I mean, I honestly, based on my work, I understand I understand the impact that demographics and the economy play on this. But I'm just saying, if you really want persons to buy into this, to me, just the persons I talk to, that's a big issue. So then that is what comes back to me saying, what is the end goal? Like, if you come here and you say we're going to 70 now, none of the trends that you have explained, fall in birth rate, life expectancy. I mean, we're not going to stop taking care of elderly. We're not going to stop investing in healthcare. People are going to live longer. These trends are going to continue. So then we do this now, we increase the contribution rates and everything, and we buy ourselves 15, 20 years. So then what? The age goes up again to 76. To me, and the reason why I'm asking this question is, I feel like every time somebody pays those 500 contributions you talked about to qualify, those 10 years, you now have an obligation to that person, right? At some point. So then there comes a point that is like a conveyor belt. You get people still coming in, even though it's less persons. You now have an obligation to them down the road. But you know that you still have a problem funding it. So then as a board, what I am saying is you guys have to think long-term and say, there comes a point where we know that these persons are pensioners, we know that these persons are going to transition to pension soon, or transition to getting a pension soon. We have to prioritize them, and we have to think about how we are going to fund this and not keep taking on additional liabilities that might not be sustainable. If I could find a good example outside of insurance, it's like saying that you are, you have, let's say you're buying a car and you keep putting money into this vehicle, but you know that at some point, this vehicle is just not going to stop, it's going to stop working. So do you keep pulling money from other pools in your household and everything instead of finding a brand new situation? And I personally have my own, what I would like to see happen, but as I said, I understand that my thinking might be a bit more radical. But I'm just saying, in the context of, I know we're trying to protect the NIS, pay pensioners, provide for the future, I still think we have to think about long-term sustainability. And I'm not convinced that moving the pension age all the time is sustainable. That's my contribution.
Before you go, so we're not saying people have to, we're offering up options. We're not saying you got to work till you 72, 82, 92. So these are options. But just the second thing, you said you had a radical. Please expand.
Well, before I get to that, one thing I would ask, since you brought up the 72, so right now the age is 67, right? If I early retire, as you say, at 60, do I get the pension at 60 or do I have to wait to 67 to get it?
Right now, yes, you will get your pension at 60. If you apply at 60, you will get it at 60.
Okay,
but it's a reduced amount.
Yeah, I understand that. So you will get it. Right, it's just, so 67 is just the age to get the full amount, but persons still will be able to retire early.
Absolutely.
Okay then, so I haven't formalized everything, but in my mind, as I said, I believe that we have to look and understand, or the concept of cohorts, or where we are in the life cycle. So you have persons that are actually getting their pension right now. You have persons that are pretty close, right, to getting a pension, and at that age, they might not have many options other than to depend on this NIS. They've contributed a lot and stuff like that. You then also have persons like me that have a bit more time, might have a bit more options, and then you have persons that just not in the system as yet, right? Or maybe they're old enough, they're working, but they're in the informal sector. And what I'm saying is that, to me, I think that the priority has to be the persons that are already getting their pension. I believe that, you can quantify the cost of paying those pension benefits and everything. But I think for persons that have a bit more options, and that's why I say the survey to me is important, we need to find out where those persons are at in terms of their own planning. So, like you just said that retirement, you said that the NIS was constructed back in the 1960s. People were salary workers and everything. Pardon? Oh, sorry. I'm saying that retirement may no longer look the same. No longer maybe some person is relying on getting a check or something in their bank account. Some persons might have a business, you might have a rental property. Some persons might have investments, savings, that stuff, right? So what I'm saying is the survey is important because you need to find out where persons are at. If there are a large amount of persons that can handle their own affairs, and I can't really define what handles their own affairs are, what I'm saying is that those might be the persons that don't necessarily need to depend on an NIS or full NIS pension. They might just be contributing now towards like some basic amount, the solidarity that Derek has spoken about so much, which is for persons that have contributed, and that rate would be much less. If there's some flat amount that you'd be giving persons, they could contribute to that. That would be far less. But those persons can be given an option to say, okay, do you want to be in the NIS plan, like to get a pension that you're talking about, or do you just want a reduced amount where you understand that? And I don't want to say it's like a tax, but basically you're contributing towards your fellow man, right? You understand that there are persons out there that are below the line, and this is your responsibility as a citizen. I personally believe that that cost will be far less than what we're trying to do now. And with the disposable income that is created for persons that opt out of this plan, I don't like using the word opt out because that creates fear when it comes to these kind of systems. But for the persons that opt out, you can monitor that. It's not like it's just cash in their hand that you want to give them to spend on what they want. You can say, okay, if you're not putting this in an NIS fund, you have to put this in something that makes sense. And there are investment vehicles out there are pension plans out there, something like that that can be tracked, that you can say to persons, okay, if you're making good use of your money, then you can do that and you can manage your own affairs. But as I said, I don't have everything in my mind formalized. I'm just saying my issue is asking someone like me to continue paying money for a system that might not be sustainable in the long term. I'm just saying it might be time to rethink everything on a whole and ask me maybe to contribute to a lesser income for persons and let me handle my affairs. But I do understand it's a very radical way of thinking.
Yeah, I think Jerry wants to, we would love to have your contact details, I think, first.
Mm-hmm.
We want to see all ideas for sure.
Okay.
Jerry, maybe you ask your question first.
Well, so I have an answer for you along the way, but I want to ask you a question about the opt-outs.
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago, COVID hit Barbados, and the government decided to give all people in businesses who were struggling, self-employed with the small businesses interruption, help.
Mm-hmm. Through the unemployment fund?
No, through its government-owned money, not unemployment. It was through
okay.
government.
Okay, sorry. Mm-hmm.
How would you deal with somebody who opted out?
You
Under
mean,
such would you give them support as well if they opted out?
are we talking from the NIS fund specifically?
It doesn't matter anywhere.
Okay,
It doesn't
right.
matter anywhere.
So the answer to that question would be, okay, let me put it in another way. I believe that COVID showed us that unemployment is a very big risk, not just is a big risk everywhere, but it's a very big risk for an open economy like ours that depends on tourism. I personally think that unemployment I don't want to say is a risk, but I honestly think that maybe, just maybe, that needs to be a bigger focus now of the NIS, right? So to answer your question, no. If they weren't contributing to something and the money was coming from the NIS, I cannot say that I believe you should be able to get anything. I know that's not politically expedient, but that is just my take on it. What I am saying is I do believe that there is room for the Okay, best way to put it, retirement funding is something that can be, there are other entities out there, private entities, that do handle retirement funding. Nobody out there, as far as I know, protects persons against unemployment other than the NIS and their savings, right? And in catastrophic situations like COVID, you have a hurricane that hits stuff like that, we can see easily what will happen, right? So the NIS does have a very big purpose, I think, when it comes to unemployment. I'm just not certain that, and you still will have the problem that you're referring to with your falling demographic and everything if you're trying to fund unemployment. I really do understand that's still a problem. I don't know the costs that, the unemployment would have or whatnot, but I am saying that definitely when I think about retirement, I think that there is room for the NIS not to go away, but to step back from its responsibility. And as you guys said, focus on the most vulnerable persons. The income that you would have to provide for them, I'm pretty certain would be cheaper than the cost of what you're providing now on average. So, as I said, that's my submission.
Thank you.
No, I just want to make a couple of comments there. You used the words you were worried about sustainability of the fund. We're here to fix that, right? This fund is going to be sustainable. There are many countries that have done it, and we can do it. So I don't want anyone to go away thinking that they're fearful that this can't be fixed. It absolutely can be fixed. There's no way we're saying people have to retire at 72. We're seeking to have opinions so we can assess what people actually want to do. And the final piece, just on the unemployment. A lot of this fund is self-insurance, is about solidarity. Now, that's not just a fancy word. In the pandemic, normally when in any given year we might pay out between $43 and $49 million to people who are unemployed. In the pandemic, because of COVID, it was 3 times that amount. It was $147 million. I just ask you to imagine if those payments had not been made, what actions people might have been driven to just to feed themselves and their family. If we want, there is a concept of private insurance for unemployment, for sure. But if we want to be in a every man for himself society, as I call it, that's the flip side of the opt-out. And I just say one other thing. I always have trouble when people say I'm pretty sure that the numbers would confirm what I'm saying. Show me the numbers and confirm it, because I'm not sure that you're correct in the absence of numbers.
Mr. Nichols, I sit down here and I don't think that your solution, or how should I say, the framework of the solution that you propose is that radical. I've heard Deputy Chair and I've heard Derek talk about the structure of the NIS. And what you are suggesting to me is the same thing. You are saying to us that in order for the NIS to be sustainable, we can't. In fact, somebody else said that to Mr. Strickland. Mr. Strickland said, yes, Strickland said that too. For the NIS to be sustainable, it is absolutely clear to me that the structure has to change. We just cannot go forward saying, well, you pay more money and you get a pension at a later age. That cannot work. I am positive about that as I see it. To me, the structure has to change. I'm speaking for myself.
Just a couple of points on, so great comments. And I want to suggest that the unemployment for a young person, or sickness for a worker, or maternity for a new mother, is no different from old age for an old person. That's their unemployment. So while 2 years ago we were hit with a storm, and NIS kicked in a lot of money to people who, out of nowhere, had no work next week, and they wasn't sure when they were going back to work, and we all realized how critical NIS was then. That's the same way I believe older people feel when they can't work anymore, and NIS kicks in every single month with at least $1,100 a month or whatever the minimum is. And that's their survival, that's their lifeline, as NIS says. And so opting out is opting out for unemployment is like opting out for old age. You really can't separate the two because they're different stages of life. And so we have to make sure we cover all contingencies. The math, go ahead.
When you're finished.
No, so I'm going to talk about the math. So the reason we're not sustainable today, so we talk about demographics. We also have to look at the math. It's essentially, the contribution rate going in is less than the average benefit per person going out, right? So, we were on a talk show on Brass Tacks on Sunday. I think Peter Wickham is the name of the host. And he started off by saying he knew of this lady, she was 92 when she died. Her benefit when she died at 92, was it 4 or 10 times? It was 4 times, 6 times her final salary, right? So she retired a long time ago with the NIS benefit. And with adjustments and increases, she lived long. So she got pension for plenty of people, right? So she got maybe 2,000 times more than what she put in. There's some people who on the first week of a job get hurt. I heard a case the other day. First week of his job, he lost both hands, pensioner for life. Didn't put in a cent, but he got a lot of money. There are people who die at 61 who put in plenty of money and die and get nothing. So it's a solidarity, it's a social fund, right?
Yeah.
And so the math has to make sense. And that's why I think the structural discussion is where we have to go about making sure the math makes sense.
And so I will agree with what you said in terms of the numbers. So I was trying to do some reading before, but I don't have all the numbers. But I do have then one question, or I would like clarity on something. I know there is the maternity benefits, there is the unemployment, there is sickness
invalidity,
severance,
survival.
Disability, right, and retirement. Do each one of those, in terms of the total rate you pay, have a separate rate that then totals up to that final rate?
So each benefit has rules to qualify, and each has its own formula as to how much you get.
Right, but in terms of the contribution rate, there's a reason why I'm asking, sorry. The only reason why I'm asking is back to what you were saying. I definitely was not agreeing with opting out for unemployment or certain benefits, right? I'm just talking specifically about this pension that I don't think is sustainable. So I agree. Unemployment, maternity, those things, if those could be segregated, you know what is the contribution rate for those and the cost of those, that can be managed fine, right? But it's the retirement I was talking specifically about. Right. So I'm not saying on my scale, I just don't want to be in NIS and that's it. That's not what I'm talking about. Yeah. Okay.
So NIS has 3 funds. Well, they have more funds. The funds we talk about are severance has its own fund, own contribution rate, paid by the employer only. Unemployment is shared 50-50 by employer and employee. National Insurance Fund has the bigger rate.
Yes.
And even though you may see on paper that there's a rate for non-con and a rate for con and so on, essentially it's one real rate, bundled rate for National Insurance Fund.
Okay, understood. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
And just before the survey, so the objective of this survey is going to be to identify how strongly Barbadians believe about certain things, right? Is what do you really want to see in your NIS? How governance, investments, right? Transferring costs to children and grandchildren. Those kind of questions are going to be in the survey, trying to hear from you, you know, where you are on the spectrum from strongly agreeing on certain things to disagreeing on certain things. And from that, we can get a good feel. Right, and there'll also be each question will have an answer. You can just type and go crazy and answer as you wish to with your suggestions. And they'll be looked at, I promise you, and they'll be considered.
Good evening. My name is Karen Jordan. I don't have a question, more of a comment that no one's really talking about, and I want you to be mindful. First, let me say, I don't want the NIS to disappear. That's chaos, anarchy, all kinds of problems that Barbados can't afford. Right, Rodden? But nobody's looking at the impact of, and I'm going to speak specifically on raising the contribution rate or the amount or the percentage, however you want to look at it. Nobody's looking at how this impacts the average person. I'm not talking about our high income earners. I'm not one. I'm talking about people that are making, let's say the average is $5,000. Your PAYE is what, $300-400? Your NIS is capped at the 11.1, 4,800. That's like $500 odd. What is that person left with if you move it from 11.1%? Or you move it from the 4880 cap, what is that person taking home? How are they going to survive? They have a family, they have bills, and we know everything is going up. And you took well, they don't fall into the 1% pandemic levy, but nobody is talking about these people on the threshold and how hard it will be for them to pay an increased contribution rate. You're just telling me, oh, we got to pay the rate because we want the fund to survive. I want it to survive too, but you can't have it surviving at the expense of people living today. My husband always tells me, you worrying about tomorrow and you putting down for 10 years from now and for 15, what about now? What about now? And he's not wrong. I've figured out 65, but it is between now and 65. And if you keep talking about increasing the rate and the longevity of the fund, people are suffering today. And nobody is talking about that. They're not getting salary increases. And you're reducing their salary by increasing the rate or increasing the, however you increase the rate, percentage-wise or cap-wise. They have less money. And these are the same people that you've got to get a good PRO team to get them to buy into this. But they're not going to buy into it if when they go to the supermarket, they can't eat. And everybody's getting up and talking, but nobody talks about this one thing. And I've got lots of questions. I've got other things I'd like to say, but other people will address those. Nobody is talking. Nobody is talking about the people on this threshold. And they are, that's the middle class, and they're getting squeezed at every juncture. And if we don't have a broad middle class, we do not have a Barbados.
Just as before anybody else wants to come up, this is the kind of comment that we like to hear to remind us. I would say Derek does have a slide up there that talks about benefit adequacy, affordability, and coverage, basically. And we're pretty conscious that when we assemble working groups and advisories, that we need people who can speak to that, because we're finance heavy at the moment in our view, and we're actively, and we've spoken to several people we believe can bring that perspective to whatever solution is implemented. Any other person would like to come forward with questions, comments, or ideas?
Sorry, go ahead. 3 quick things. One, I think there needs to be the clarification that you can apply for a pension, because I think some persons might not recognize this, you can apply for an early pension at age 60, which is a reduced pension, which is 42%. But it would mean if that calculation comes to less than 243, you can't get an early pension. And that is what is depressing individuals, because they hear 60, can get a pension at 60, and they also assume that at 67 is going to increase at 67. So we must be very, very clear in what we say to our population. But the 2 other things I want to say very quickly, and this is changing legislation. During the pandemic, it was even prior to that, there were many women who became pregnant and did not qualify for maternity benefit. We changed the qualification for sickness, injury, and unemployment in 2006, I believe, that you can qualify for those benefits on all credits. And we did not change for maternity. And I continually, this is years I've been trying to bring to some person's attention, we need to re-examine that legislation, because it's unfair to women that they are sick from the time they become pregnant, they have the receiving sickness benefit, and therefore it means there's only a 9-month period in there that they get in sickness benefit. They should be able to get the maternity also on all credits, because it's the individual who is sick for a whole year and gets sickness benefit for a whole year and then gets invalidity afterwards. I think that part of that legislation needs to be re-examined. The other part was legislation, and that is of maternity grant. As far as I'm concerned, there should be no requirement that the father and the mother who are not married should be living together, because he has paid his contribution, and if his name is on the birth certificate, which is the highest legal document in Barbados, he has signed at the registration department that he is the father. The maternity grant form he has signed also says the father. He should never have to say that he's living with her, because Bajans, living with persons have different qualifications. We cohabitate in the same house, or we have sex together. That's living with her. And therefore, very often somebody demand his meal still goes home and they cohabitate. So there's a lot of, I think that law needs to be re-examined because there's no requirement where the two persons are married. They don't have how long they're married. That, and the last part, and this comes out of the whole issue of increased population. This is not national insurance, but it's labor legislation. Because if a lady is pregnant the 4th time and she applies for maternity leave from her employer, the employer can invoke the legislation and terminate her just because she got pregnant. So we are encouraging persons to get more children, but if you miss and get more than 3 with the same employer, going through the edos. And that has got to be changed. Yes, I came across it by accident many years ago, but I verified it with the Labor Department before he came in this afternoon, though. So it's still on the statute books of Barbados. So the honorable member for St. Peter, who happens to be the labor in charge of labor, you can pass that question over to him. That he deals with that one at his department, that women do not have to fear losing the job because they got pregnant.
Are you sure it's losing job or not entitled to maternity leave?
Eligible.
Huh? No.
Are you sure?
Hold on a minute. There are 2 issues. There's the issue of maternity benefit versus national insurance.
No, before you get there, employer.
No, hold on. Just 1 minute. I'm saying there's the issue of national insurance and benefits.
Right.
There's something called maternity leave. Because once you submit your form to your employer, you're applying for maternity leave. Okay, I'm telling you that there's a particular employer who's now redundant was going to use that against an employee many years ago. And I would suggest that if you are qualified and you know the legislation in respect of labor, speak with authority. But I'm saying to you, I spoke to the labor officer this afternoon because we want to confirm it. You want some, and the employer can use that, indicating that you've been pregnant the 4th time with me, and therefore I can terminate your service, or you have terminated your own services. So I'm just saying, it's on the table to be examined, and I would hope and pray that the information is clearly communicated to Barbadians, because I'm saying this needs to be changed in legislation from whenever we are in 2022 at present. Okay? And I'm really passionate about all 3 of those, that we need really to re-examine them. I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Strickland. Certainly, we would look at the legislation when we look at this reform. So we thank you for those. Those certainly need looking at. And as I said earlier, that this pension reform and our discussions in the public has thrown up the need to inform persons and have them understand how our process works and the benefits and so forth much better. So thank you very much, and thank you for your contribution to NIS over the years and continuing.
Mr. Strickland, on a lighter note, during COVID, when I would ask a member of the Royal Barbados Police Force what he's doing, he's telling me, man, I'm busy with domestic disputes. So I am glad to hear that maternity leave was also went up to balance the domestic disputes.
I have a question for maybe the audience. And so what Mr. Strickland said a while ago was, so you're 63 years old, you stop working, and you apply to NIS for a pension. And they run the math, they run the formula, and it falls below the minimum. And NIS said you can't qualify because you don't qualify for the minimum, the reduced minimum. Do you think that it should be payable at 63 at a low level below the current minimum? Or should the minimum be the minimum? Minimum should be the minimum, nothing lower. So if the formula works out to be 800, let's say, a month at age 63, but the minimum is 1,000, let's say, keep it simple. Should you get 800 at 63, or should you wait till 67 to get 1,000? 800 earlier, what were you saying? Can we get a show of hands?
Is the minimum a livable minimum, or is it just the minimum?
Right, great question. So there was a study done in 2016, Living Conditions Survey, led by the IDB, and the poverty line essentially was $600 and something. I forget the exact number. 642. If you add inflation to that, it might take you to 800 or less than 800. Now, I don't know what $800 can buy, but that's what they said was the poverty line. The minimum is now 1,011 something a month, 243 by 4.33. Right, 245 is 243, 243? 243 by 4.33. 1052 is the monthly minimum. So the monthly minimum is actually higher than the poverty line with with inflation added for the last few years. So the question is, should there be a minimum for 67 and maybe a minimum for 64 and 65? Or if you don't qualify for the minimum, you stay without until 67? Show of hands, I mean, how you feel? A smaller, even if it's a small pension you get earlier, or you wait for the bigger pension, 67?
So you mean a sliding scale, each year you would get?
Sliding scale.
You would get an increase okay, I say yes to that one.
I get something.
You get something as opposed to having to wait. Right. So that's on the table as well, right? So that could be an enhancement. So again, not everything in discussion is going to be a cut, right? There's some, for example, paternity benefit. The ministry is thinking about adding a paternity benefit. I think there's a mention a while ago about maternity leave, and they thought about even making it longer, from 12 to possibly 14 weeks. They talk about adding paternity benefit, and that's because many employers now are offering paternity leave. And so if the ministry puts in the labor legislation, paternity leave, which employers would have to allow a husband or a father to take if he wants, and NIS would have to have a benefit consistent with that leave, whatever the rules of the leave are. Okay? So the discussion we're having for the next couple of weeks is not only about cutting, it's about filling any gaps, avoiding duplications, and making it make sense for Barbados.
Okay, who else has a sliding scale style suggestion to give to us here? Or a comment or an idea?
Good evening to everyone. I just want, not playing devil's advocate, but I just want to ask a couple of questions. A few years back, I remember a former minister saying that if nobody in Barbados paid national insurance for the next 12 years or so, the money will be saved. I just asked saying, where the funds gone to? I know we had COVID, but I'm just asking, how could it have been so good then to reach a stage now where we're here, we're not in crisis, but we're preparing for crisis? That's one question. Yeah, you can't wait for crisis to happen, but it still seems a bit far-fetched that we were hearing so much money was there, and now there's not enough money that we could actually say, yeah, we're on good footing. I always felt within myself that with the onset of COVID, no government, whether it was local, regional, or international, would be able to sustain the workforce that was enjoying the benefits before COVID. What I'm asking, if all these suggestions that we are making, could we include this? We have children that come to school and vandalize equipment, government property. Could we also include that if this happens, yeah, the parents are pulling a lot, but let the children that do the vandalism also contribute, and that fund too goes to the NIS. Because if government is going to be providing the equipment, the books, whatever for the children, let it start from, say, 14, 16, make some contribution so that if one of them is injured or the parent for some reason isn't there, we start this from scratch so that in the long run, we would not be back here 20 years from now.
Before you go, the first comment you made about the size of the fund, I wasn't sure if I heard it right now. You said 5 times?
Pardon me, sir?
The first point you made. The first point you made about a minister said the fund was good for, is it 5 years or 9?
No.
12.
Earlier on, the statement was made by Esteban Saku that if people do not pay national insurance for another 12 or so years, we would be safe. And I was like, which country am I living in?
Yeah, I'm not sure when that was made or where that was made. Yeah.
Such a statement was made that we were safe. So that's why I said, if we didn't have to pay anything, where has the money gone that she was talking about? That was one.
Okay, would anyone else like to come forward? I'm sure there must be someone who has a comment or a question or hopefully a solution that they want to offer. Thank you.
Good evening. I have an impediment in my speech, so I'll try my best. I just arrived, so I don't know if what I'll say will be relevant. But with my own ailment, I now have the experience of the disability side of the NIS. And I'm not sure that everyone is aware, but obviously, the basic idea is if you're on disability, you cannot work. And that seems pretty obvious. Except that if you think about it, you might have someone who is a basket maker, a hat maker or something, and this is not related to working at somebody's company and paying national insurance. This is you sitting in your own home and making a decision between being bored to death or doing something. But the letter that you get with disability makes no bones about it. It says, not only can you not work, you cannot do anything for which someone would normally be paid. It says that. It goes further, and it says that your whereabouts must always be known to the people in your household. That might all have been perfectly relevant to the situation of the past. But if you think of it, and you look at countries like Germany and France, there are different levels of disability. I haven't lost my hand or my leg or anything like that. I was involved in sales and marketing, and obviously, if I can't speak clearly, everybody says, well, I'm unemployable. And I appreciate the disability. But wouldn't it, if you look at levels of income, and the fact that now that I am getting your disability, for which I'm extremely grateful, as soon as I pay my mortgage, I have about $300 left per month. Now, I have the mental ability to assist either the government or to assist myself. I do not feel that I should be allowed to go and work in the general workforce. But I might be self-employed as a sole trader or more as an independent contractor, and you can monitor my income after a certain level, and therefore, yes, I'm getting disability, but if I make a little more money than is accepted as basic, I pay some back to you. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of Barbadians that are disabled, and not a single cent is coming to national insurance. So it's something you need to think about.
You know, and I've been nodding every time since you started, you know, because it's come up before, and I'm so glad you raised it. As I said a while ago, everything is on the table, including enhancing benefits. What he's saying is that for 55 years, NIS if NIS deemed you to be invalid, you got 100% of the benefit. If you tried to go back to work and NIS found out, they cut you off in full. There was no middle ground, it's either 0 or 100. And it's a prime example here, you know, from self-spoken, that I can do something even though I have a disability. And we have to find a way with technology, it's possible, I believe, that if you used to make 1,000, and now you're making 500, let's make it simple, you're essentially half disabled from an income perspective, to keep it simple. Allow you to earn and still earn some of NIS so that you actually could live comfortably, you're productive, you feel better about yourself, you contribute to your neighborhood, and you pay contributions. So again, an enhancement could be made, right, to do that. So everything doesn't mean cut. And the same for survivors. We have some rules now where survivors, if you're under 50, is a 1-year pension. If you're over 50, it's for life. Those ages are old, right? Things have changed. We have to make sure that each benefit makes sense for today's Barbados. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, there's one more point. I won't go into the details here because I'm hoping to be able to communicate with the director afterwards or something. But national insurance has to be very careful. And I am certainly not any of these political animals around looking to bring down any government. DLP, VLP, XLP, that doesn't interest me. But you promote yourself, you market yourself as the advisors to the public of Barbados. Well, I got advice from national insurance for over a year. In fact, the advice was first offered in 2018, but I wanted to make my contribution to Barbados, so I went back to work. But when I was deemed not able to be part of the workforce, it was then another year of advice from national insurance. Now at the point where you tell me, you need to bring me X, and as I say, I won't go into detail now. But national insurance, the national insurance scheme can face many lawsuits if I take you literally as my advisor. Because you then decide to pay me from the point at which you tell me to go and get that sign and come back. And it has cost me, someone called the figure here, we need to discuss it. I have been prompted over and over and over again, get a lawyer, put in a report. I'm not that kind of person. Mr. Hayes might not recognize me now that I've lost so much weight, but he knows me. I'm a good nation person, a good will person, but I need to talk to you guys. Because that year can mean $20,000, $25,000 in losses to an individual. That doesn't do anybody any good. Neither national insurance nor the individual. Okay? So I'd be happy to be able to chat with someone outside of this world. But my final point is that in the same way you are doing this, I volunteer free of cost to research as much as I can on similar situations worldwide and send it to you. I'm not like the lawyers who are going to sign off a $500,000 check for my advice. But I'm going to give you the advice free of cost and set it in front of everybody. All I need to know is that when I try to communicate with somebody, that the person just doesn't hear me, they listen to me. So I'm asking as immediately as this meeting is over, an email address, a phone number, something, so we can talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think that has brought us to the end of our 2 hours, but I'd just like to, well, yeah, the chairman is just making sure I don't deny anybody a chance to come up. Okay, I think we're clear. Mm-hmm. But I beg your pardon, come forward, sir. Yeah.
Deputy Chair, I want to say to the gentleman that just spoke, please, you can see me after, and so we can exchange telephone numbers and so forth. But on the screen as well is the email address for where you can send your suggestions, but certainly we can speak. And don't let's leave without speaking to you.
Hello, good night, everyone. Just to follow up on the question that the lady proposed or spoke of, where she said, Esther Suku said that even if no one had paid, the NIS was that sung, but it seems as though it's so sung that the table is so silent. Correct. So I'm wondering if we can have a response from the table. Correct. Just before you speak. Now, on the other hand, Ms. Motley and team were saying it's that bad. And therefore, the people of Barbados changed the government. So I'm wondering what happened. I'm also wondering if people my age have to go on bushel and stand up. You do what? I'm wondering because if you are telling me that in 12 years, the fund's getting done, I gotta go from bushel and stand up? It's amazing. So I really want to hear. I don't expect the meeting to end tonight for a response from the table. Please talk to us. I am very uncomfortable. And what is interesting, the younger people who is coming now, they're not going to be comfortable. They don't want to join. Because after paying for so many years, then for somebody else come to tell you something else. Either I am mad or you are. So talk to us. Please don't let the table close tonight unless we get a response. Thank you.
Oh boy. You know, since that lady mentioned politics, we really need to stay away from the politics, but I can give you a little answer to that. And my answer would be, when Sir Harold St. John was alive, and I spent a lot of time with him because our offices were next door to each other. I remember one day Sir Harold telling me, Leslie, when they get up on the platform and they run out of things to say, you talk a lot of nonsense. But on a serious note now, the correct answer to that lady, I think, is, in my view, as a lawyer, when I quote something, I would refer to a report. We do have a report from Mr. Osborne that we have been using. So that, and the question would be, whoever made that statement, what was their authority for making it? And if they had no authority, were they an actuary? I don't know. But those are the questions that I would ask. So that is as much as I can say on the statement made by I think the lady, she didn't give us a name, but I can see her down there at the back. Thanks.
I think one of the reasons, thank you, sir, for the comment. I think one of the reasons we didn't respond is we weren't sure where this number had come from. You know, when Derek was here, looking back in the records at this, the number you're referring to is what's called a reserve ratio. So the 12 years would be a reserve ratio of 12, indicating that that reserve could pay for 12 years worth of benefits if no contributions came in. Now, at the start of the meeting, and then I'll hand this to Derek, we indicated that 2013 was the first year that expenditures ran ahead of income, meaning that that fund, that reserve fund, your bank account, if you like, National Insurance Fund, started to pay the difference. So the fund started to actually finance this gap that was growing because of the demographics. You know, and today the fund contributes about 25% of that gap. So there is a drawdown on that fund that started in 2013. Now, in terms of the actual numbers, I want to give this to Derek because I'm not the actuary, but, so he can talk you through the numbers he recognizes and perhaps give you that answer.
Right, so thank you. I think the first thing I want to say is on the NIS website is the actuarial report. So I'll encourage you to go there, nis.gov.bv. Right, and there's a tab called reports, and then you see actuarial reports. And you can find the 17th one, the 16th, 15th, you can find the old ones there. In the report that we just completed, the page 16 has the reserve expenditure ratio, which we use as a measure of the size of the fund relative to, outgo, right? And it's not the best number because it assumes expenditure remains constant. So neither reserve nor benefit remain constant. But it was 7.3 in 2014, 7.2 in 2017, and 5.3 in 2020. So, and there's a graph on page 15 that has the historical reserve all the way back from 67. And it was, the last time it was at 12, it would have been around 1975 or something. The last time it was 12, right? So again, we aren't quite sure what the reference to 12 years is, where it came from. But if you look in the report, you can see the historical change in the reserve expenditure ratio from 67 to present, and a summary of the last 3 actual reports.
Okay. Now, if there's anything else, please let us know right now because it's time, in the absence of that, for us to wrap up. I think I heard somebody over there. Increase in the funeral grant, I'm gonna hand you over to the director.
As we said earlier, we're taking all suggestions at this point, so we note your suggestion as well with regard to the funeral grant.
Thank you, ma'am. I just invite the table, starting with the CEO, if she wants to give any closing remarks. And for my part, I just thank you for turning out. I thought we got some valuable information tonight. It was really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. First, I would like to thank all of you for your contributions tonight and for turning out to have this conversation with us. We really appreciate you coming out. As we said, it's a solidarity fund, so we are all in this together, and we appreciate the solidarity that you have shown with us. As the Deputy Chair and Derek would have shown you, one of the pillars of a sustainable social security system is a good administrative system. And as the director, I give you our assurance and our commitment that that is very important to us, and over the next couple of years, that is what we're going to be working assiduously to ensure that the efficiency is significantly improved. With regard to the pension reform, as we've said, the structure is obsolete. We're paying out a lot more in benefits than we are taking in contributions. Actually, this year we will pay out $300,000 more in benefits than we are taking in contributions. And that is the system that we are dealing with. So it is obsolete, And we, however, can shape the future that we want together, something that is sustainable, affordable, and adequate for all Barbadians across generations. Let me just finally say we are not in crisis. We have been paying all our benefits. As I said Monday night, we are in the process of paying pensions up to September 28th or September 29th because we process for a month in advance. So we're in the process right now of dealing with September's pensions, and they should be out shortly. So we are not in crisis. As the actuary would have showed you, we have 12 to 19 years before there's a crisis. However, we assure you that we are acting responsibly and bringing this situation to you so that we can, in a more relaxed environment than in a crisis environment, design the national insurance system that would take us into the future. So thank you very much once again for coming out. We really appreciate your contributions, and we appreciate hearing from you.
Yeah, I don't think we can top that. Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Good night.